Mr. Speaker.
Jan Loki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise to take a reasonably short call on this, the second reading, the Local Government Auckland Council Amendment Bill number 3, and of course to congratulate the member Alfred Naro for having a bill drawn from the ballot and making it through to the second stage in what seems like a high level of support in the House for it, and the Greens too do support this bill. It is not a world-changing bill. What it does is that it will prohibit membership of more than one local board. And currently, out of 149, I think, elected members in the Auckland area, 5 are currently on 2 boards. So, and this won't change that for those elected members. This is for going forward in the future to ensure that that practice doesn't continue and certainly doesn't extend. And that's an idea that the Greens support, and the arguments that were made of the submitters in favour of this bill on the grounds that if you're on 2 boards, there's a really high chance that you're going to come into conflict of the needs of those 2 different communities when you're putting a case for a budget bid, when you may be competing for shared resources. And also just the point about, we know that local boards are that level of governance that's connected, is most connected to the people. And what a difference it is when you're in your local community and you run into your local board member and you get to have that conversation with them about the traffic lights that are down the street that are causing a problem, or the footpath outside the school, or any number of the issues that are a concern to our local communities. And if you are on 2 boards, the chances are you're not going to be as present in one of those communities. You'll be more present in one than you are in the other. So this helps simplify that problem and make it clear that we ideally want our local representatives to be clearly committed to one community and not put into a situation of being in conflict. I do note that Orake Local Board, in their submission, they made the recommendation that the candidates standing in local elections not be required to state on their candidate profile statement whether or not they live in the area for which they are seeking election. For them, it was, I think they were making the point that they saw the skills as more important than the embeddedness in the community. I think the reference was made to this House and the fact that there are members in this House who are electoral representatives who do not live in the electorate to which they are representing. And it was seen, there was a question where they thought that maybe the intention of this bill and the fact that central government was going to be making these decisions, or this House, for a local community, when it could be said that there's not the same degree of consistency at this level, they raised questions about. They also, and I think it is worth canvassing some of the other points that they had, which were that Auckland Council undertakes multi-roles, and for example, 2 full-time councillors are also members of the Auckland Transport Board, and are full-time councillors and full-time local board chairs who are also members of district health boards, licensing trusts, district licensing committees, and a wide range of other sports, community and business organisations. So they were arguing that concept of the job being too big wasn't valid when people were doing serving on multiple boards as it is. I think though, my understanding in the committees and discussions and for the Green Party, there is a difference because if you're on the DHB that covers one area that your board sits within, you're going to be arguing for that same community, and you're not going to be in a situation of conflicting community needs where you may be pushed into representing one community over another in a particular process. Though they did also argue against what I'm saying on the basis that they see in Auckland that there's an issue around the local boards not having a mechanism to connect them, and actually quite often they saw that there would be value in having people sitting on multiple boards to be able to improve the discussion and sense of coherence between boards and communities. And I think that's an interesting argument, but not one that we believe is best solved by allowing members to represent multiple communities, but rather looking at that the mechanisms of overall governance in Auckland and providing possibly some better bridging mechanisms between councils, and continually reviewing the processes for input into Auckland Council itself. And it does seem as if there certainly is still more work to be done in that area to get our democracy in Auckland functioning in the way that we would ideally like to see it happen. And just to talk through that, the committee has worked through some of the logistics of how this would happen. I think possibly for people may be wondering, how would this work? So the idea that has been presented is that people can run for multiple boards, but that they would be required to submit a form and say, okay, I'm going to run for these boards, and this is my order of preference for what board I would like to be on. So if I got elected to all 3 boards that I was running for, the one I chose as my preferred board would be the one I would take up the seat for. And then the other boards would go to the next person, and that this would be, I would be required to identify this priority ranking in any candidate profile, so that the communities knew that I was running on multiple boards and what my list of preferences were. So it does bring in, I think, a sensible degree of transparency. I do imagine that that would have an impact on how people voted in the communities if they saw that, you know, that their community was the 3rd preference for the board that you were going to be on. I can't imagine it's much of an incentive to run in those 3 places, but that, I guess, is part of the intent as well. And one other small aspect of this is that it will prevent existing local board members from running in by-elections for another council, to prevent that possibility of kind of people leaving one place, going to another one, and another position opening up, and you have this kind of cascading by-election situation as people move from one to another, which seems unlikely but is a good thing to guard against, and that has been taken care of in this bill. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, the Green Party is happy to support this technical, not earth-shattering bill, but something that we hope will help strengthen those principles of community embeddedness and good representation in Auckland. Thank you.
Ron Mark.